Well, good morning, Laingsburg community. Good morning, First Congregational Church. Welcome to our online service. I am Dr. Tom, and we are in Ordinary Time, and we are in the middle of a series called Ordinary Revolution, following some of these stories out of the book of Mark. Now, today in this book here, we're going to be in a passage out of Mark 4, where Jesus is sleeping on a boat and the storm's raging all around, and the disciples have a little bit of a freak out moment. And we're going to explore a little bit about what this means and what it doesn't mean. So I've had a little bit of a crazy week myself, so we're going to try a little experiment where I just open it up and I've been studying a little bit, but I have no outline and no notes, and we're just going to free ball it today and see what happens. So hang on, we're going for a ride, and I'll see you in a minute. So what we have here in Mark 4, Jesus has done a little bit of teaching, which in the book of Mark, that's about all we're going to get, is just a little bit, because it focuses in on the actions of Jesus more than the teachings of Jesus. So Jesus does a little bit of teaching. We explored a few of those last week. You can go check that out on our YouTube page or on this Facebook page. But here Jesus turns to his disciples and says, hey, let's cross to the other side of the lake. And he's already in a boat, and the disciples get in, and it says that they take him onto the lake. They take Jesus onto the lake. And while they're out there, Jesus falls asleep in the stern, resting his head on a cushy little pillow, and this windstorm kicks up and starts to batter the boat with waves. And the waves are crashing over the edges of this boat, and it starts filling up with water. There's a freak out moment with the disciples, and they kind of frantically wake Jesus up. Aren't you concerned? We're all going to die. What are you going to do? Jesus stands up and just says, be still, be quiet, to the wind, and everything calms down, and then looks at the disciples and says, why are you still afraid? Or why are you so afraid? And they're just kind of looking at him in wonder, saying, who is this person that even the wind and the waves obey this guy? And the common interpretation, or maybe even application of this, is that life can throw some storms our way. It can get windy and turbulent with the different trials that come our way. And if we just cry out to Jesus in prayer, he wakes up and he can calm the storms of our life, and then ask us where our faith is. That has always been the application of this passage. The storm is always equal to the trials of this life, and the disciples calling out to Jesus is kind of the application point, is that's our version of prayer. So if we pray, then Jesus rescues us from whatever we're facing. And that can apply until a point when you get to a certain scenario where you encounter tragedy, where you encounter like a chronic pain or illness that doesn't seem to go away. When you encounter things that Jesus seems to not be rescuing you from, then all of a sudden this verse starts to have a little bit of a hard time. What do we do with it? There's a couple of problems actually with this interpretation. It's actually not a Christian interpretation to say that, there's all these storms going on, and then if we cry out, God comes to rescue us. This gives us a picture of a God who's sleeping, a God who's distant, a God who is unaware of what's happening in our life until we say something. God is unwilling to intervene in our life until we say something with the right words, with the right faith, something along those lines. And if we just cry out to God, then all of a sudden that's the magic doorway opens up and Jesus rushes in to rescue. That's the common understanding of this verse, and it's actually not Christian. That's more deistic. Now, the deistic is an older belief that says that God made everything like a clockmaker, and then wound up the world, just like you'd wind up a clock, set it on the shelf and then goes about his business elsewhere. Like, I got other things to do. I wound up the earth. It's going, it's doing its thing, and I'm not really concerned about it. So there's a light deistic understanding of this verse that says that God is unaware or unconcerned about our life until we do that cry out moment. And then all of a sudden, the rush in to rescue happens. And that's not Christian, that's deistic. So what is the meaning of this passage? What is our application of this passage? That's what we're going to explore a little bit more today. So let's acknowledge the weird of this story first. Let's acknowledge some of the things in here that readers of the day would take note as being a little bit odd, a little bit weird. It opens up that says, as evening came, Jesus turns to his disciples and says, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake. This is weird just to start off with, because I don't know if you've ever been on the lake in the dark, but it's scary, y'all. It's like scary because you can't see. This is before you have those lights. You know, if you've ever been on the lake in the dark, you can see boats approaching. You know, they got the green and the red lights telling which is the stern and which is the other end. I don't know what's the other end of a boat. I'm not a sailor at all. I like the ground. I stand on the ground and then I watch the water. I don't go in the water very much because there's things in the water. So this here to say, hey, it's getting dark, let's hop in the water and cross the lake. Now, this would have been a 6-hour journey on a good day. So when evening is setting, you think that this is the time to settle in. This is the time to find a nice place to lay your head, you know, find like your Holiday Inn and get your room, check in, and just be all cool. But Jesus does not say that. He says, hey, it's getting dark. Let's go out on the water and go to the other side of the lake. So he's pulling an all-nighter here. This is on purpose. He's pulling an all-nighter. So that's the first weird thing that we got to take note of. It's weird. The disciples are going to be looking at each other like, what is this guy up to? Why is he taking us out in the middle of the lake in the middle of the night? Don't he know that it's scary out there in the dark and we can't see where we're going? And they don't have like lighthouses to help guide us. It's just, let's get in the boat and start going off in the dark. So that's the first thing that's a little bit odd. And then it says that if you've seen those classic paintings of Jesus calming the wind and the waves, you've seen that, you know, there's all these storm clouds and there's rain. It's like going sideways. And then there's, you know, the waves are like 5 feet tall, and it's just like riding one of these swells going up, and the disciples are freaking out. It's not exactly how this is playing out, but that's what we have in our minds. It's real dramatic, and we're thinking, you know, those things. The Sea of Galilee is not a really monstrous lake. I mean, it's big, but it's not like Lake Michigan or, you know, Mediterranean Sea or something like that. It's a fairly decent sized lake, but it's not huge. You don't really see swells on a lake like that. So what happens is this is kind of a low point because water gathers at a low point, but it's surrounded by mountains. And you know that atmospheric pressure is what causes wind. When there's a difference in temperature, the wind rushes in to fill in the difference of the temperature. Now, there's cold air going up in the mountains. There's warmer air down resting on the water. If you ever look at the radar maps on your weather apps and you look over the lakes, everything on the shores of Lake Michigan is always like just a little bit warmer in the summer and a little bit cooler a little bit warmer in the winter and a little bit cooler in the summer, because the water generates like a regulation of the temperature there. So when this wind, or when the temperature difference gets drastic enough, there is a rushing of wind that does not have any rain or clouds or anything. It'd be a bright, clear night. Not a bright night, but you know, like a clear night, see all the stars, but this wind would rush down, and the wind hits the water and starts to cause these waves that go up and down. Now the waves are probably going to be 1 to 3 feet tall. Now this doesn't sound like it's very monstrously huge, crashing over. But you got to remember, this is a fishing boat they're in, and this fishing boat is made for a crew of 5 people. Now, 5 people would leave about 2 feet above the water line, according to how they constructed these boats. But you pack 13 people in this boat, all of a sudden you're pretty overloaded. And then you're gonna be weighed down more in the water, so you got maybe 1 foot to 6 inches on the sides. Things are about to get really dark for all the disciples and Jesus. This event here is pointing to the death and resurrection of Jesus. This story of the wind and the waves is going to be a picture of the disciples freaking out as Jesus descends into death, not knowing where he's gone, why he's not responding. And this crucifixion moment is this Jesus sleeping in the stern of the boat. It's supposed to be a picture of where Jesus is about to go. He's going to be asleep. He's going to be dead. He's going to be crucified and buried. And the disciples are going to be freaking out because the authorities are after them, and they're going to be hiding, and they're going to be fearful. And in the book of Mark, after Jesus has the resurrection and he tells them to go and tell everybody, they end up not going and telling everybody. They end up hiding in fear in their bedrooms and just saying, we ain't going anywhere. And the early church hated this ending of Mark so much that they rewrote another ending. And you can actually see it in the footnotes of your Bible if you go to Mark, the last part. They give a short ending and a longer ending. Both of those are rewritten at a later date. The real ending of Mark is just everyone's hiding in fear. So this fear is a big deal in the book of Mark. And this fear is what Jesus is addressing in this moment. And especially, they're going to be in this in-between time of Jesus being dead before he's resurrected. And they're going to need faith to get through that dark night, that dark storm, that dark wind, and they're going to feel like their lives are threatened. And then when Jesus wakes up in this passage, it's the same verb used in the Greek language as when Jesus resurrects. So here's our clue that says that this is actually pointing to the death and resurrection of Jesus, and the disciples freaking out in the meantime, in that in-between the death and resurrection moment, and saying, this is going to happen again. I'm giving you a little foretaste of what's going to happen. And I need you to have faith in that in-between time, in the midst of the crazy, in the midst of everything falling apart. I need you to hold it together. I need you to have faith that I have this. So he descends into death and then rises again, conquering death and establishing the kingdom of God on earth in kind of like a inaugural moment. It is inaugurated, but it's not all the way here yet. So now you and I are in an in-between moment as well. We're in between the resurrection and the fulfillment. So what does that mean for us, and how does this passage apply to us? That's not necessarily this deistic, if you just pray hard enough, God rushes in to rescue you. Let's look at that part in the last section here. They're on the water, and in this ancient understanding, they really believed that the place of the dead, that the Hebrew people called Sheol, was actually at the roots of the earth, which were at the bottom of the sea. So they thought that they're going to be sucked down into the place of the dead, that their souls were going to be obliterated in this by dying on the water, on the sea, and that they were going to be pulled down into the underworld. And so to be on the lake in the dark was a real act of faith, because of they were on the underworld. They're basically surfing death at this point. And with this storm coming up, they really believed that these spiritual forces of evil were at work to bring them down under. So Jesus here, through his death and resurrection, when Jesus rises from his sleep and says, be calm, what it is a symbol of is not Jesus taking away the difficulties of life. but Jesus taking away death's ability to destroy the soul. He's defeating death and any spiritual power that is in partnership with death. He is defeating the very enemy of God's good creation, and that is death, by rising from death. So this moment of being on the water, out surfing the waves of Sheol and death, and Jesus having authority over it, he looks at the sea before they set out and he says, let's cross over. So what this tells me is that it doesn't matter if I live or die. It doesn't matter if it's easy or hard. It doesn't matter. Those things don't matter when it boils down to the end of all things, is that Jesus has defeated death and robbed it of its ability to crush my soul. And I will get to the other side one way or the other, whether it's a nice calm voyage or whether it's really stormy and wind and wave and just can't seem to get ahead of the game with bailing water. Either or, we're going to get to the other side because Jesus has defeated death. This is a picture of the work that Jesus did on the cross and in the resurrection. He's defeated evil and sin and death and shame and all of those things that have the ability to destroy our soul and degrade our soul down into nothingness. And Jesus has defeated it all and liberated us and says we will cross over to the other side. Easy or hard, sunny or rainy, windy or calm, we're getting to the other side. And that is what this really points to, not the alleviation of difficulties of life, but to get to the other side regardless of how life plays out. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Sunday outside here in front of my barn in my backyard. And thank you for supporting us with your ongoing finances. We've got a couple more supporters coming in this month, and we are so truly grateful. If you want to join this community, you can follow our Facebook page, or you can subscribe to our YouTube page, and you'll be notified whenever we post something new. If you would like to support us financially so that we can keep these things going, we would be so grateful for that support as we seek to rebuild after coronavirus has really dismantled a lot of things. We're going to rebuild, and we're going to seek to continue this online service to be a place of hope, help, and healing for all of you, and that our in-person community will be a place of hope, help, and healing in the Lanesburg area. And any support you send our way would be received with much gratitude. So have a wonderful day. We'll see you next week. We're going to be in another passage of Mark talking about this ordinary revolution of love that Jesus has sparked with his life and with his death and with his resurrection. And we'll get there, y'all. We're gonna get to the other side. So we'll see ya soon.